Everybody, how's it going? It's a Saturday. It's August 12th, 2023. This is an NFL Survivor Pool video. I'm on the West Coast. There's football games going on. I've been getting some requests to discuss football and especially Survivor Pool. So, talk about what's going on in the NFL algorithm. If you want to copy this file, follow the links. Check out the links in the description on kenbraverman.com, and you'll see different options that you can purchase. But this video here is really directed at if you're running a survivor pool or if you want to browse through the schedule for the season. And a survivor pool in NFL is generally you pick one team to win a game each week, and you can't pick that same team twice. For example, in week one, if you chose the Washington Commanders, and I'll explain why that's probably a pretty decent pick here in week one, they're playing against the Arizona Cardinals. They're home in week one. That could be your pick. And if they win, you're going to advance to the next round and be 1-0 during the season. But you cannot pick Washington again in week two because you've already picked them once. So you got to pick a different team in week two. Say you pick somebody like the Raiders over the Bills. I wouldn't recommend that. But you can see that's a different team. And you're going to go all the way down for all 18 weeks of the season. You can see, for example, that the Raiders have a bye in week 13 because they have no opponent showing up here in week 13. It's one of the ways you can use this sheet to look through and to browse different teams. So this is where you would keep those list of teams that you choose for each week. So it's helpful for keeping that list. However, browsing the list and figuring out which of these teams is the best team to choose every week, that's where it can start to get complicated. Let's go over to the picks sheet and talk about what this is, what the render is, what it's giving us here for each week. Right now, we're in the middle of preseason week one. It looks like a pretty choppy. Some are winning, some are losing. It's not going to be very accurate in the preseason because the players that we have listed in here are not necessarily playing at all. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers played at all in this Jets Carolina game where they won 27-0. He probably played a little bit. They probably got him some reps in the first quarter or something. I haven't been able to watch any games to answer that question, but it's interesting to see that the Jets really did run away against a team that played very poorly last year for most of the season in Carolina. So anyway, that's the preseason look, but let's look at week one and talk about how you use this file to diagnose the matchups and to come up with which teams might be the best teams to choose in a survivor pool. So here are the teams that the algorithm is favoring in week one right now. Now, this is week one of the season that we're talking about. That happens in September. It's 3 weeks plus away. These rosters aren't even finalized yet. So all these numbers are going to change. And this is just a preliminary look right now. But it is a preliminary look, at least. And what it's saying is it's saying, where do you have a win score that's a positive number? And also a projected margin of victory that's a positive number. These numbers over here. And it says something like the Bears are going to beat the Packers by 12 points. Well, that's because Aaron Rodgers is no longer on the Packers and they have only Jordan Love and another quarterback who hasn't had any reps at all. So it's not including these players that don't have any stats from last year or hardly any stats. It's not including them in the projected score. So it's difficult to use this right now to predict the entire season because we don't know who's going to be playing yet. But you have to do something for week one because it's week one. So let's go through the matchups and see what we can understand is some more reliable information from this file and whether or not any of these teams might be good to pick. The Bears-Packers game, I think that this is saying don't touch this game because the Packers would normally beat the Bears. You don't know how Jordan Love's going to play. You don't know what the rosters look like because the Green Bay has so many new players that this game is very unpredictable. And even though it's showing up at the top of this list by projected score, it's because we don't have full rosters in here. So this game I would say ignore. Now, Washington over Arizona, you still have Kyler Murray somewhat injured, but potentially starting and playing for Arizona. Arizona really fell off the wagon last year and would have to completely turn it around this year to play better. Washington is under new ownership, and they also have a new quarterback, I believe, coming into Washington as well. They won a preseason game so far today, I believe it was. They won their game here. Yeah, they won a game 17-15 against Cleveland. They've got some guys that are going to be trying. So I think Washington and the algorithm agrees they have a better win score percentage and they have a better projected score, victory of 10 points here. Washington is potentially one of the top picks for a survivor pool here in week 1. New Orleans against Tennessee. Very close game by win score. Anytime you've got Derrick Henry, I believe, still playing for Tennessee, tough to bet against them. New Orleans has a bunch of new players and new quarterback. I believe, who did they sign? They signed a big name quarterback. The Saints have Taysom Hill, like he's always been. That's right. The Saints got Derek Carr in there. So that's what's kind of putting them over the edge. It's saying that Derek Carr can put up some numbers and the Saints should be able to beat Tennessee because of that. Is that a good pick? I don't know. You're going with a lot of question marks. New quarterback, new team against a established running back in Derrick Henry on the Titans. So I'm going to stay away from this one as well. You can see the win score percentage is not that high. It's only about 6.7%. And you can't pay as much attention to these projected scores for week 1 because, like I said, our rosters are just a disaster. We don't know who's playing yet. We have some of these people in here, but we don't have the majority of the rookies. We don't have anything assigned to them. So we're really kind of looking more at win score and also other factors that are related to the teams, like new ownership. I mean, getting Dan Snyder out of Washington can only have positive impacts for this team. He's been slowing them down in many areas. I always thought that Dan Snyder was a closet Cowboys fan and he was trying to destroy Washington. And it's so great that he's gone. I believe it's the Harris organization that has purchased Washington. So I would expect better things out of them this year. This New Orleans game, kind of close, but it does say the Saints win. Says the Giants beat the Cowboys. Okay. Says Daniel, is it Daniel Jones, I believe, or Mac Jones? It's just one of the Joneses is a quarterback for the Giants. He's got decent numbers because he can run. Daniel Jones, I think. So says they'll beat the Cowboys, but once again, going against the Cowboys, even though the Giants are home, NFC East battles, I don't know if it's a great survivor pool pick where it wins, 80, 90% of the time. So keep going. Chargers, that is where I am closest to right now, is the old San Diego Chargers stadium. They're in LA now. They're at home against Miami. Miami also has signed a lot of people, but gone through, they have so many different quarterbacks. It's predicting a ton of points in this game. It says the Chargers win here 26%. Even though Herbert's ranking is not great, you'd think it would be better, but the algorithm doesn't give Justin Herbert as good of a rating as you would think. Does say they win. It's probably up there on the survivor pool pick list, but once again, I mean, going up against a Miami that seems to have signed a lot of different people and looking to try to score, I think is risky. So I'm still saying that Washington looks like the best one on here so far. Philadelphia over the Patriots. Philadelphia, excellent season last year, just barely couldn't finish it off against Kansas City. Patriots, have a good reputation, a good team in general, but Philly, Jalen Hurts, they came out so strong last year. The only problem is this game is in New England. So you're dealing with a road team. And I think a lot of people in week 1 are going to be considering taking Philadelphia as their survivor pool pick team. So that would make you err on the side of not taking them, because if they do manage to lose and all those other people get knocked out, you want to have the sleeper team that wins that you don't really want to use later in the season that you can use here in week 1. So while this is probably a decent pick as a win, it's probably going to be heavily owned by other people in the contest. So that might be a reason to stay away from it. Niners also have a new quarterback situation because Garoppolo went somewhere else. He went to Vegas, right? Yeah, Garoppolo, I believe, went to Vegas. Not sure who they're trying out in San Francisco. I did a whole video about quarterbacks. It's somewhere in there. Against the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh did not have a great season last year. This is one of those the Niners should win. But once again, you're going into Pittsburgh, not necessarily a great pick for a survivor pool. Tampa Bay in Minnesota. Tampa Bay has a terrible win score percentage here, but says they would win this by points. Minnesota tends to win games that don't matter like this early in the season. So this is another one that I don't think it's necessarily a great pick for the survivor pool. Ravens at home against the Texans. This one's probably going to be heavily owned. Look at that 64% win score percentage. When we sort this list by win score, that is the number 1. So you can expect that Baltimore is probably going to be heavily owned, and they're also probably going to win against the Texans. I know the Texans don't have Deshaun Watson anymore and have brought in a new quarterback. They brought in Davis Mills and Case Keenum, CJ Stroud, is it? A lot of guys that probably put up mediocre numbers. So Lamar Jackson, wanting to start the year off right, is probably going to do that at home. Baltimore tough at home. This line is probably also ridiculous. Yeah, the money line's like minus 380. So this is probably going to be the most heavily owned. And here in week one, when you don't have a lot of information about the rosters, that is a pretty safe pick, but it's also going to be heavily owned. So you probably want to try to go with a different team. Cleveland at home against Cincinnati. Don't want to go against Burrow. You can see that the win score percentage favors Cincinnati and not Cleveland. Somehow the points favor Cleveland here. That Battle of Ohio, stay away from that. Anyone can win that game. Atlanta over Carolina. Now, this is a sneaky one. So Atlanta's got a pretty good win score percentage here, and they're favored by points. They also just won their preseason game quite handily today. Where were they? Atlanta. Here. Atlanta beat Miami 19-3, apparently. They also signed some folks. They look like a sleeper team that is going to be doing better this year. They brought in, who did they bring in? Desmond Riddler. Haven't heard that name before. They got Taylor Heineke from Washington, who's not a bad quarterback. Felipe Franks. The kicker, Tyler Allegheny. Some guys, I don't recognize a lot of these names. You do see a lot of rookies, but they do seem like a sleeper. So this is one of those that is not going to be that heavily owned. People understand that Carolina has had trouble last year and probably won't fight. So this is the sharp man's pick, I think, for week one. I know you'd be like, taking Atlanta in week one. Well, you may not want to take them later in the season. You get it out of the way against Carolina. This is, I think, a smarter pick than something like Baltimore. It's on par with a team like Washington, which also probably won't be heavily owned in a survivor pool in week one, like Baltimore will be. So Atlanta, Washington, especially if you're playing multiple survivor pools, you could probably take one of each in each tournament. So Atlanta is one that the algorithm is pointing as probably does something good against Carolina. Kansas City over Detroit. That one's also probably going to be pretty heavily owned. Mahomes going to be playing. It's in Kansas City. What are the odds Kansas City drops a game to Detroit in week one? Highly unlikely. This is also probably heavily owned, but also probably a good pick. So Atlanta, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Washington are four relatively strong ones right now. Then we have Denver apparently over the Raiders, but I wouldn't buy that yet because you've got Garoppolo now playing on the Raiders. Don't know what's going to happen here. I'd stay away from this game. You've got Jacksonville away at Indianapolis, has a huge win score percentage with Trevor Lawrence quarterbacking. Is Indianapolis? Oh, the Indianapolis doesn't have Dalton. I think it's Carolina that has Andy Dalton now. That's another reason to go against Carolina, right? Carolina's quarterback, Andy Dalton. Yep. Carolina, Andy Dalton, and then Jake Lind. So who is quarterbacking Indianapolis? You got Sam Ellinger, and Gardner Minshew. There's going to be a weird quarterback battle here. Both these guys just haven't really put up what they need to. Ellinger is the one where when you're talking about fantasy and you're thinking about taking a quarterback on Indianapolis, it's probably Ellinger. He's got a higher rating than Minshew, and Minshew's probably starting as well. So that's kind of an interesting situation there. Expect them to fight that out. And that means that Jacksonville does probably win this game. Jacksonville team that plays better away. Is this game in London? I mean, half their home games are in London anyway. At least they were last year. So Jacksonville, another sleeper one that probably beats Indianapolis, but it's not really as strong as something like Atlanta or Washington. Then you have the Jets over the Bills. This one's not going to be heavily owned, even though they have Rodgers. People are not going to be going up against Josh Allen. This is going to be a really good game. Is this a Monday night game? Like when is this game? It should be a primetime game. We can check the schedule. see exactly when this is in week one. Week one game. Yeah, that is the Monday night game. You've got Rodgers and Allen. Fantastic. I'd probably leave that off the survivor pool choice because that's probably going to go anyway and be an excellent game to watch. But you don't necessarily want to have either one of those teams, your entire season survivor pool riding on either one of those teams in week one. But expect that to be a fantastic game. That wouldn't it be fascinating if the Jets end up winning that game somehow, just like they did last year for us when we had the Jets over Buffalo, but that was in Buffalo. It finishes off with the Rams against the Seahawks, and it would favor the Seahawks. Normally, the Rams had a really rough year last year, and it's got a really low scoring game. So there are significant roster changes. I think you've got Drew Lock and another quarterback I didn't recognize on Seattle, saying a close game down here by point projections. So probably not a solid survivor pool pick. So in summary, for week one, algorithm thinks that this is probably the best pick for accumulation of multiple reasons, meaning new ownership, generally a bad team last year in Arizona, team that wants to play, team that should win by point projections, team that should win by win score, and a team that's home. Washington is basically what the algorithm is saying is the best survivor pool pick for week one when we have limited information. All this will change though as we get stats from the regular season in here. And week two, week three, this is not the way that week two is going to look. This is not the way week three is going to look. Everything's going to change dramatically. And I am sending this file out to those who subscribed and purchased the season subscription. I'm not doing videos like this, guys. I'm getting people ready, and I'm not doing videos anymore. We're keeping this away and out of the hands of the odds makers this year because we're going to give ourselves an advantage. Whenever I publish this information and I start putting everything out there, the lines start to emulate what's in the algorithm. It happens in all the sports that we do. I've been asked multiple times by a variety of people to stop publishing things publicly because they would like to take advantage of this information on a need to know basis and get it directly from the source and run these algorithms yourself. I hear you. And that's what we're doing this season for NFL. So if you're interested in having this file to set up a survivor pool and to browse, I'll make this one individual file less expensive than the rest of them because it's all going to change. And it's not nearly as valuable once the season starts, but it's certainly valuable for browsing preseason. So I'll put that up and available. And if you want the $300 main subscription where you get my work every week and you get this file by email and you get access to any private videos I do that are not going out to the general public, but they're just going out to people that subscribed, then you can go purchase that. All right. So let's go Washington, my hometown team, even though I'm not in Washington right now. I'm in California. In California stuff. A lot of events and parties. So anyway, I got to run. Good luck, everyone. May all your picks be winning.